Hello everyone. So in today's video I'll be talking about these two cordless telephones, and back in the 1980s we had a lot of cordless phones. This is not made in the 1980s, this is more recent. I think I bought this back in 2000 and let me guess, maybe around 1999 or something. So this is about, the frequency of this phone is about, I think, back in 1999, it's about 2.4 gigahertz. But the first cordless phones had a frequency range of maybe around 40 to 50 megahertz. So a megahertz is 1,000 times less than a gigahertz. So this is 2,400 megahertz. This phone I bought more recently. This is about 5 gigahertz. I think it's 5.8 gigahertz. And this phone uses, see what kind of batteries it uses. It uses 2 AAA nickel metal hydride batteries. But the first, I could also use alkaline batteries if I want here. But the first cordless phones that were released in the 1980s used a nickel cadmium battery. And I think this one uses a nickel metal hydride battery or something. Let me check just to make sure. And oftentimes you have to replace the batteries on these things because they would go bad. I didn't know that back in the day. So what I did back then was, when these things stopped working, I guess my parents just threw them away. They didn't know you could replace the batteries on it. The most popular brands back in the day were AT&T. There it is. This is the battery. You have to replace this after you charge it a number of times. I don't know how many times, or maybe 1,000 times or something. These have to be replaced. It's a nickel metal hydride battery. So this is newer, probably released back in the late 1990s. And then the cordless phones that they had back in 1993 up to 1999 were, I think, 900 megahertz. And these were very, I mean, this was before we had smartphones, basically. Before we had stuff like this. Now we don't even use, I don't even have a analog phone in the house anymore. Simply don't have any analog phones in my house. There's no landlines in my house, so the frequency got higher and higher as time went by. It went from 40 megahertz all the way up to 5.8 gigahertz. So you can see in the frequency graph, 900 megahertz is it has a longer wavelength compared to 2.4 gigahertz and 5.8 gigahertz. And 40 megahertz has a much longer wavelength than 900 megahertz. So that's how these things worked. The ones that I had in the 1980s had a pretty long range. I could basically get a signal from one part of the house to the other part of the house. The house was about mostly 2,600 square feet. That was the house that I lived in back then, and I could basically didn't have any problems with range. But I think these newer phones, they have a higher frequency, so they might have a lower range. I think the reason why they switched from 2.4 gigahertz to 5.6 was because 2.4 was getting kind of like saturated, so they moved to 5.6. This phone, I think I got late. I didn't get it. My parents gave me this. I think they bought this back in maybe 2000, and I'm not really sure, maybe 2010 or 2011, something like that. Now they don't have a landline, so I just took this phone and I'm using it as a virtual. As you can hear, it does work, because that's because I'm using it for phone over IP in my house. So it's basically an IP phone. The connector is, of course, analog, and that basically, but it's a digital phone. I'm using it as a digital phone in my house, basically. And there's really no need to have cordless phones these days, because like I said, now we have smartphones, and the smartphone replaced everything. It's basically used for everything else. And these things have something called a base station. The one that I had back in the 1980s, as you can see in that picture, the base station is pretty large, right? It's about this big. The base station for these modern cordless phones are much, much smaller. And yeah, so that's why these phones don't exist anymore, unless you're using it for phone over IP or something. Then you could probably have kind of like a landline in your house using your router, which connects to the internet. But you have to get a VoIP machine or device which you could connect to your Ethernet, and which connects to the internet, and you can get the service that way. But other than that, there's really no use for it. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. If you have any thoughts or questions, if you had a analog cordless phone, you could let me know in the comment section below. And these things were a lot more convenient than using a standard corded phone, as you can see, because you could move around the house and answer the phone, which was quite a step up from using a analog phone. Okay, thanks for watching.